got some other folks from our office, Ben and Chris back there. They're doing some filming. We've been trying to record some of our presentations so we can have them on our YouTube page. So tonight I'm just talking mostly about our energy implementation plan, kind of going to walk you guys through why we got it, how we sort of came up with the information we've got, what we intend to do with it. We're not going to get too deep into statewide energy policy. We will, even though it says we're not going to talk about the enhanced energy planning standards, so I wrote this slide before they released them last week. I'll talk a little bit about them. You know, they're new, they're draft. They've only been out for since a week ago yesterday. So I can give you some information on that, but they're still not finalized and won't be until November. So if folks haven't grabbed them, there's a bunch of handouts including our plan and a number of the appendices up over in the back. There's also the draft standards and one other document that the Department of Public Service has provided on their website that we printed out in case you want to grab those. So anyway, let's roll into why we have an energy plan. You know, this is all comes out of the Vermont's Comprehensive Energy Plan, which was in response to trying to reduce greenhouse gases ultimately. And the plan that came out in 2011 set some pretty lofty goals. The one we hear most about is this idea of reducing basically setting it up so our energy generation is 90% renewable, in-state renewable by 2050. But there are also consumption targets and individual targets for specific sectors. And much of our plan focuses on these sectors like transportation, building envelopes, and power generation and use. Obviously, we have an energy plan, that's why the state has one, for various environmental reasons, economic reasons. The energy generation, renewable energy generation sector has proven to be a pretty viable business sector in Vermont of late. Energy security, the instability of getting a majority of our energy generated through oil or petroleum products is there's a lot of instability involved with that, so the more we can focus on generating our own, the more secure we are from an energy standpoint. So the state has this plan with all these lofty goals, and they tagged 3 RPCs, Regional Planning Commissions, to do this pilot project, which basically said, okay, here are our goals. We want you to come up with a pathway to meet those goals at the regional level. And so they wanted us to develop this pathway. They wanted us to set some regional targets for energy conservation and fuel switching, develop strategies relative to conservation, energy efficiency, and reduce fuel use, and to identify energy resources in areas with potential for generation. So, needless to say, we had to have a lot of data to be able to make some of this work. Most of the modeling was done through the Vermont Energy Investment Corp. They used the total energy study which came out in 2013 as sort of the basis. There were 3 scenarios discussed in that study. One was kind of doing things as we are. The other was a carbon tax shift. And the last one was this total renewable and energy efficiency standard, or TREES as they call it. That was the one in the total energy study that would ultimately get us to this 90% by 2050 target. So when VEIC was doing the modeling, that was sort of the pathway that they took.
How was VEIC chosen?
They are, actually I don't know how the state chose them. I don't know whether they had people bidding on it or whether they tagged them because they are really our energy information clearinghouse. And so they were really the most qualified to do the job statewide. So that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that because that's way above my pay grade. So data and assumptions. And we're not going to get too deep into the data, but if you guys look in the back, there is the methodology that VEIC produced is much more detailed. Feel free to dig it out, take a look at it. They use a lot of historic information from the Public Service Department, the Energy Information Administration, projections from the total energy study. Assumptions include things such as that population growth won't grow at more than 0.35% per year. They also have assumptions around commercial demand drivers, industrial energy use, transportation energy use, and of course the assumption that there are going to be reductions in energy use due to changes in technology, including building shell and device efficiency improvements. So the results of the model, and they did this entire state, but for our region, we are going to be reducing our energy use by nearly 40% overall. So 10.8 million BTUs drops to 6.5. Part of this is through fuel switching. So you'll notice that electricity use actually goes up. Biomass goes up very marginally. So we're going to be banking on using more electricity because we're going to be doing things like using heat pumps and whatnot, and electric cars. And feel free to interrupt if you have questions. I'll do my best to answer them pretty good about some of this stuff. So our plan focuses on these three components as a general rule, and this is in part because this is the way the state's energy plan looks at it: thermal, transportation, and electricity. So it's broad, but focused on some specific components of energy use. And in addition, we also look at renewable energy generation capacity. And the modeling comes up with, if we need to increase our energy consumption, then we're going to need to have this much energy capacity additional to what we have as of 2015. So any renewable energy generation facilities that were in play or permitted or already active as of 2015 are counted already. And so this is above and beyond. After 2015, they're going to count towards it. So I think the facilities that are in the process of being permitted in Bradford, for example, the one next to across the road from Farmway, did that get a permit?
Yeah, it's already up.
It's already up and built. Amazing how fast it happens. So that one came in after 2015, and I think that their permit application was after 2015. Was it? Yeah. So that would be, you guys kind of, if you guys are doing your math, sort of say, well, if we want to try to get these targets, then you can include that as part of that.
But we only can count them if they're keeping the credits.
Right.
In state.
Yeah, and that we'll get into that a little bit, but that's a thing. And that's out of my control for sure. So these are targets. They are based on one pathway. This isn't necessarily the right pathway, the best pathway. It's the pathway that this project and the modeling we did came up with. It was the one most viable during the total energy study to get us to 90% renewable by 2050. But ultimately, it's a pathway.
Did they make any adjustment for the different types of housing stock there are? Because if over in the Burlington area, it's got to be a lot newer on average than it is over here.
In relation to what? To generation or to energy use overall?
Energy use.
I mean, the age of housing stock is considered, and the fact that we need to improve a significant, it's statewide data.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's distorted because we have older stock.
Well, but most of this data is older stock.
Than Burlington.
Yeah. So I mean, I think.
Burlington has most of the people.
Well, I don't know if it has most of the housing. So,
Probably.
I think it's fairly equalized as a general rule. I wouldn't worry about that specific thing. I don't think that's a significant problem because that's also not the primary. That's not the primary data driving this. That's part of it. And age of the stock it's considered. We discussed in the plan. The comprehensive energy plan recognizes that there needs to be a significant amount of retrofitting of existing stock in order to make this plan work. I mean, there's a whole lot of if in here. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of things that are. It's a pathway. Will it be the pathway ultimately? It's like we're all getting on the road here and we're saying, okay, so these are the directions that we've got to get there, but there may be detours in the middle of this thing that we have to go around and move around and work around in order to get where we're trying to go. But it's a start. So as part of our job of identifying renewable potential, which is what's on our maps, we look at solar, wind, hydro, and biomass, woody biomass specifically. And this is how we get to making the maps, plus some other things. But this is the basic data comes from, looking at the topography. For solar, looking at slope and relationship to the sun. For wind, it's looking at wind speed and topography. Hydro is exclusively looking at existing dams and existing hydro facilities. There's no discussion of creating new dams because that's just not tenable. But what they are hoping as part of this model, and I'll admit that this is one of those areas where I look at it and I'm a little skeptical. They think that you can make efficiency improvements with existing dams or retrofit existing dams to be able to make these gains that they're talking about.
In the appendix, it's got places where there's no current existing dams going to 4. I think that's a point.
Right.
Yes.
Well, it may be right, and this is because this is based on the. There was a dam study in 2009, and there may be some existing dams, not existing generating facilities, but existing impoundments and dams, and they identified those as potential locations.
But the one that's in Thetford's federally owned.
Yeah. But it could still be, maybe the feds could be convinced to do it. I realize that's, the data is what the data is. And this is what they used, and.
Dual purpose dam, flood control land.
Right.
But for generation.
I mean, it could very well be, but I think we can agree that getting the Army Corps of Engineers to do that is probably not like a possibility. But, and like I said, the data we have for the wind and solar, I'm pretty confident about this. As a general rule, it's as good as the topographic and the wind data and the slope data is, but when we start getting into this, it's what we've got, and as with any mapping, your maps are as good as the data you've got, and the data is only as good as we can get. Hopefully, Vermont is trying to update its LiDAR, update its topographic data with LiDAR, and when that happens, it will be significantly more accurate, and that may ultimately change these maps. They will be better and more accurate. We may have gains in solar or wind, or losses in terms of what's potential. The biomass mapping, that's pretty much, the maps basically just show, look, here's the wood. And it is what it is. That's less of it's less about the mapping and more about a discussion about how we sustainably harvest and where the different qualities of wood are able to go in the state. And actually, I'm making through some comments from last week's meetings, I'm going to be making some changes to the biomass section of the plan because we had a gentleman from Randolph who's a logger who was talking about there have been recent closings of a biogas facility in Maine that have significantly impacted Vermont's forestry industry because they were shipping the majority of their low-quality, low-grade wood out to there. So there's an opportunity, in theory, for Vermont to consider, maybe we need to develop another biogas system related to wood to help the economy and to also gain the
There's a large
generation.
meeting in Bradford today about how
Yeah.
bad the wood pricing is.
Right.
We had it all
Yeah.
afternoon,
And-
meetings, Green Mountain
Yeah.
Development. We're 10 million tons short of the peak, which was 10 years ago.
Right, and it was Sam Lincoln, who was at the meeting.
He was there, very active.
Was who I was talking to, and he had some good comments that I think we'll factor into the plan. Ultimately, we may tackle that in other parts of our plan. in
The
future.
last 3 projects were disallowed. The last one being in Springfield.
Right.
Fairhaven gave up when that one went
Right,
down.
and it's an issue, and because he was involved in one in Randolph years ago, and it ultimately was disallowed, and so, but
So
by us
policy
putting.
changes that are gonna have to occur for biomass to be viable.
Agreed.
It's the only truly renewable energy source we have. The others don't do anything locally after they're installed.
And I think that the regional plan, one of the things we need to do is step up and at least say, we should encourage the development of this as long as it's sustainable. And while it doesn't solve the problem, at least puts us in a position to be supportive of them as opposed to instantly reactive to say no. You know, ultimately, our communities may not want them. The other issues with these biogeneration facilities is that they're really still pretty inefficient. You know, you're talking about 40% electricity and the other 60% is lost as heat. So what we need to do is figure out the locations they can go in where the heat loss can be used for just for heating and things like that.
Springfield.
Yeah, right.
Springfield night.
You know, but
That was a perfect
Randolph probably would have been a good place too,
Yeah.
because even though probably the investment to get the heat to happen from a district standpoint would be phenomenal. Ultimately, if the money was there to make it happen, it might be a really good thing for communities.
Same thing with Montpelier.
Yeah, except I think they do theirs is through, it must be CHIP or something like that, because they don't have they're not like, yeah, because they're not like Burlington, who's got a biomass facility in Reigate. Those are actual.
Those are the
generation
only two in the
facilities.
state.
Right, exactly. So,
And
anyway, we're gonna,
Reigate buys $45 million of chips a year locally,
Yep.
and Burlington's buying $105 million.
so I mean, that's why when we talked about this at the last Tuesday at our meeting in Bethel, it struck me as this is an opportunity where the regional commission at least needs to come out as positive, because it helps this, it's in sync with this plan, but it's also in sync with our, we have an economic development element in our plan, and and the agriculture and forest industries are both important in our region, and so supporting those, and it's two, you're hitting a target with two targets with one bullet if you can manage to make something like that work out. So I hope that I put that stuff in there, and I hope our board is comfortable with it, and that we can.
Chris, I hate to be ignorant on it, but what's the difference between biomass and chip?
It's biomass.
It is biomass. Chips are biomass.
So why is the Montpelier situation?
Because it's a quality, and because you're talking about a power generation facility versus a smaller scale cogeneration facility. I mean, the one Reigate's, I don't remember what the megawatts of Reigate is, but it's huge. I mean,
So it's
like
simply
linear.
based on the watts
It's
produced?
scale. Yeah, it's an issue of scale.
I see.
Yeah.
The other thing, I've been around enough to watch when, in the 70s, the push was for electric heat, every house had to go electric. And then the electric rates got so high, everybody retrofitted to either oil, gas, or whatever. And now we have this stock of houses that's all oil, gas. To convert them back to electric is gonna be
Yeah.
astronomically expensive.
It's gonna be a big investment.
And I thought about it this summer, and the price was such that I'm not gonna live long enough to pay for it.
Right.
Well, and they weren't doing any more on-peak, off-peak,
Right up out in
Right, and we talk about the need for those types of rate adjustments in this plan.
why
because-
did they stop doing that?
Economics.
Yeah,
Economic, that's
Everything is
economic
economic.
power company, they ended rate 11
Has,
prior to 2000.
has anyone, prior to right now, brought up the point that photosynthesis, that really, that's where your biomass comes from, that's 1% efficient, whereas solar electric is, about 20% efficient of solar electric. A doctor who worked with Jim Hansen at NASA from Tufts gave a presentation up here. Is this on anybody's radar?
I think that I wouldn't say that they've come out and said this specifically, but if you read the comprehensive energy plan and the trickle down to our plan, I mean, biomass, we don't even have targets for biomass generation. It's assumed that people will be heating with biomass, a percentage of people will be heating with biomass, and that we want to encourage these combined heat and power, but there's they're clearly looking at solar and wind and a little bit of hydro as the primary carriers of renewable energy. This idea of us suggesting that we do a biomass generation facility came out of a discussion last week, and it's recognizing that one of the points that Sam Lincoln made was that you know, we have all these forestry, those of us who are in current use have forestry management plans. We need people, you know, we need that management to happen. Usually what they're taking out is the lower quality wood. That's the type of wood that goes to these generation facilities, and now that there's not an out-of-state location for that to go, we've got a glut, and it's an opportunity for us to consider adding that as a thing, but it's never, I don't see biomass as ever being a significant player.
In electrical generation?
Not the same way that solar and wind would. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, because in terms of, you know, the total energy equation,
Mhm.
it's a big loser.
Right, and I think, I mean, if you, well, we'll get into it, we're not there yet, but we'll get into the specific targets a little bit. Actually, no, wait, we're here. So, I mean, so biomass isn't even in this generation. So you look, if we choose this path, and we do try to go 90% renewable by 2050, then our region would need 139 megawatts of new solar capacity. And you can see that it's a significantly different number here for wind and hydro, in part because hydro is limited by existing, and with wind, it's also limited by our potential, which is significantly lower than some other parts of the state. But, you know, not that significantly. I think it's just that we recognize that this is probably the most viable source for folks.
What do we have right now for solar capacity?
You know, Steve, I don't know the number off the top of my head. It's not significantly, or significantly high in comparison. I don't know if I've actually seen those numbers for the statewide figures, but I mean, you know, I know in Sharon, it's probably they might have 10 already there, and there, you know, I wouldn't surprise me if our region we have maybe 30 megawatts, maybe. And that might be an overestimation. Although there were so many there were so many permit applications last year, that number could be significantly higher. I don't know. So on our maps, one of the things we did as we were looking at these is obviously there are some areas that, regardless of whether they show up as having potential because of these various criteria, that they should still be off the table. And so we've got what we call level 1 and level 2 constraints. These are removed entirely, so even if there was potential for generation in a given area, if it had floodways, federal wilderness, rare and irreplaceable areas, vernal pools, wetlands, it just doesn't show up on the map. It's not mapped. Again, this is based on the maps that we have. There might very well be a wetland that's in an area that shows up in your map. There might be an area that shows up as having potential that really doesn't have it. The maps we have these other things, and you'll notice if you look at our maps that there are 2 colors. And what that does is show sort of the areas where there's potential, and there are these level 2 constraints, which are things like ag soils, habitat blocks, hydric soils, deer wintering areas, etc. These are the areas that when towns are thinking about where do we want our potential, where do we want to encourage renewable energy generation, that recognize that these areas are the areas that you probably should give a really hard look. You know, do we want them on prime ag soils? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. And the other thing too to recognize is that at least when we're helping you guys with your mapping, we can move things, or you could add some constraints to this. Sharon, for example, is struggling with having a facility proposed immediately adjacent to a historic district, and that's a concern for them. So you could add historic districts to this. You could put in things in the area that are here. If the town absolutely didn't want to encourage renewable energy, solar specifically on prime ag soils, you could move that to a level 1 constraint, and then the maps wouldn't show anything that had prime ag soil. So these are, again, the maps are intended to be tools. So this is just to give you an idea of what this looks like. This is, I believe, Newberry. So this is a bunch of area that I'm pretty sure is mostly prime ag soil up here, and it is orange, which indicates it has level 2 constraints, and the yellow is where there are no constraints at all, at least based on the data that we've got. So if I was a community and I was trying to go, okay, where do we want to sort of identify as the preferred areas, I would start by looking at these yellow areas because they are the ones that have a limited amount of natural resource constraints on them. And whittle it down from there. So, let's just talk about what we're gonna do with this plan. I really focused when we were writing this on trying to put actions in it that we can actually do. So, a lot of it focuses on outreach and education, because that's one of the things that the Regional Planning Commission is capable of doing. You know, we do have policies and action items that talk about encouraging changes in state policy. We're talking about modifying the regional plan in various places, supporting existing initiatives. Vital Communities is doing a lot in the Upper Valley, and so that would be, you know, what they're doing. We would support that rather than trying to duplicate what they're doing. We're going to continue to participate in Act 250 and Section 248 proceedings, and we're going to work with communities on trying to make stronger energy plans, particularly if communities are trying to get this enhanced energy planning certification that we'll talk about later.
Who did you say you want to duplicate their efforts?
Vital Communities.
Oh, Vital Communities.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So ultimately, our plan is going to be adopted by the Regional Commission. It's going to serve as a guide for us to do as we move forward toward the state's energy goals. It would be also allow us to approve local energy plans for this enhanced energy planning certification. Right now, if the regional commissions don't have a plan that has been vetted by the Department of Public Service, then they would be the entity that approved a local plan. But the way statute is set up is that once we get approved, then we are the ones who do that. And our plan is intended to serve as a tool for you guys. So we collected a lot of data, we've done a lot of the modeling work, and we've done the mapping, and so that gives communities a starting point. That means you guys don't have to come up with everything from scratch. It means that we can hopefully feed you the data and help you kind of move from there.
Now, Chris, this enhance or energy certification process for local communities bothers the hell out
Well, let me, I understand, and let's talk about it in a moment. Because I get into sort of the details of it a
of me.
little
All
bit.
right, I'll let
So what are we gonna do with the maps? Again, they're a tool. All those maps, our maps do is show where the potential is. They are not us saying, this is where you guys should put all your renewable energy generation. That's not what we're doing. You know, I'm not sure whether we'll have to have specific identification as part of our requirements for meeting these new standards. We're gonna figure that out, but hopefully we can just, the maps that we've got are the maps that they'll be happy with, and it can just be, here's where the potential is. And so that plays into this identification of potential areas. And we'll probably, once we're at the end of this and it isn't adopted, they will have more in there about where the unsuitable areas for siting.
And the timeline for adoption is February?
For our plan adoption,
Yeah.
no, we won't be adopted. We won't have our plan adopted until June. We adopted our annual meeting, which is in June. So what's going to happen is probably we'll go to hearings, because we have to have hearings for our plan in, my guess is March or April. So we'll have several hearings, 3 hearings probably regionally. And then the board will eventually vote on it in June. And at that point in time, then hopefully before we adopt our plan, we'll have sort of gotten a stamp of approval from the Department of Public Service that what we've done is going to meet their standards. And then at that point in time, we'll have the authority to review local plans. So, you know, and I mean, you can go, until we've got that done, you can go to the Department of Public Service after November, when they officially release these standards, and have them vet your plan. They, I suspect, probably won't have their ducks in a row immediately after they release those standards. I'm a little skeptical that they'll be prepared to deal with that, but maybe in the winter you might be able to go and have them sign off.
Is this gonna be like a separate plan, separate from our town?
It's up to you guys. I think it could be, and the way we're gonna do it, I think, is it's gonna be standalone, and it's gonna be adopted by reference. It still has to go through, it's still part of the plan, it has to go through the public hearing process with the plan. But yeah, I mean, because I don't see any way, if you look at what I've drafted here and what our plan looks like, trying to figure out how to integrate those in a neat fashion would just be crazy. So I think it makes more sense to say, you know, for the purposes of this plan, the energy chapter adopts this by reference, you know, the policies and actions in that. And that would make at least you could have something standalone that still meets the standards that the state is. All right, so next. So there are these enhanced energy planning standards. Now, so this slide I wrote just before the standards came out, so we know a little more than we did when I wrote the slide. Again, the enhanced energy planning thing is completely optional for municipalities. You can just continue to do what statute says is required for an energy plan. You only get due consideration under section 248 in that case, but it's optional. If you choose to get a determination of energy compliance, which is what they're calling it, yes. They love to make these wonky terms like that. We know that for us anyway, for the regional plan, we need to have a multi-sector energy analysis, which this plan has, where we look at electric, thermal, and transportation. We need to identify potential areas for renewable resources, and we need to identify areas that are unsuitable. This is an area I think we'll have to beef up once we get to the final step. But I need to know more from the state about exactly what they want before I start fiddling with that stuff. So this is the language that tells, that defines what the regional plan is supposed to have for an energy component. The underlying information is all the new stuff. I didn't bother showing you what's been struck out, but for the most part, these are the new things that have been added. It's a little more specificity with regards to what we look at in terms of energy. This is more wordsmithing, and then this one is the big one, which is identifying the areas and where it's okay to have it and where it's not. Plans must, and just to be clear, if towns are seeking enhanced energy planning certification, then their energy plan will need to include all of this stuff. It basically, in statute, they changed it to basically say, if you are going for this certification, then you need to do the same things that the regional planning commission has to do in their energy plan. So you got to be, your plan and our plan will need to be consistent with the greenhouse gas goals, the energy targets, a number of the state energy policies. The other thing too is that you got to have, your plan has to be an approved plan. So, you know, in communities that have some other conflict outside of the energy chapter with state statute or the regional planning commission, you wouldn't be able to get enhanced energy planning if that was the case. So you have to have an approved plan. It is, again, it's an optional process. You can't get substantial deference in section 248 without having this determination of energy compliance. So we're hoping that we have much of the data that you guys will need to do these analyses. One of the things, and I'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about the comment period. But so this is now, they released these standards last Tuesday. There's an open comment period on them, and I'll give you the information as to where to send your comments and when it ends. But one of the concerns I have with these draft standards is they want a lot of town level data, and we really struggled with just getting it to the regional level, and it gets to the point that if you try to dig down any deeper than town level, it gets really hard with certain types of energy use, or, you know, it's easy for us to get electrical use data by town, no problem. Green Mountain Power is great. I don't know, Washington Electric might be a little more challenging, but probably they're still able to do that. But when you get into things like heating fuel use and stuff like that, it's a nightmare trying to get that data, particularly at the local level. So we'll see how that works. I know that'll be part of our comments and concerns that the expectation, they may be expecting a little too much in terms of what we can give them. And I know that they want the regional planning commission to be able to provide you guys with the town level data. So I've heard word that they're going to try to provide us all with some guidance as to how to get that. So ultimately, we may be able to get that, because they may be able to sort of say, look here for this information, look here for that information. And if that happens, then we can help you guys with that. And that's one of the things that we'll do. So there is the mapping component, and this is sort of, these two slides are my summary of the table spreadsheet you guys have that's with the draft standards, that's their sort of checklist. You know, you should have resources, constraints, transmission lines in your maps, these previously impacted areas, all of this stuff we can get you. So you guys, this is stuff you don't have to worry too much about because we've already mapped our region and we can just send you town level maps with this data. So that's not a significant problem. And that's something we can work with. So here's what the deal is with the draft standards. You can download the standards, which you have a couple of the documents. I think there's one other document. When I go to the website, if you Google Vermont Public Service Board and do draft energy planning standards, I think you'll get to this page. Comments can be sent until October 20th. There's the email address to send them to. There is a hearing next week on Tuesday in Randolph at Chandler Music Hall. I would urge anyone who wants to make comments to go to that if you can manage it, because I think this is the only hearing they're having. And I think that, at least in our region anyway. And so I think it's really important that people get out there and communicate. If not, send them in, email them in, go to the website, because I think, you know, if you guys have concerns about implementing this at the town level, then now is the time to talk about it and talk about what you'd like to see done differently. You know, I don't think we'll see significant, unless there are, you know, assuming there aren't a significant amount of comments that force them to make changes. I think that what you see is close to what they're gonna want towns to do, but I think, you know, you can get in there and get your voice heard, and hopefully they'll make adjustments accordingly. So I definitely urge everybody to get out and talk about these things. So, as far as what we're going to do, we're going to continue to you know, collect input on our energy plan. I'm going to do up comments in the next week or two on these draft standards, because like you guys, I also have some concerns about them. We're gonna, once we know, as of November 1, once we know what the standards are gonna really look like, we'll incorporate that stuff into our plan. I think one of the advantages of the way this is played out is that 3 of us had already done these plans. They're all very similar. I think they used our plans as sort of their stepping off point to figure out where to go. So we've done a lot of the work already, which will help our communities. And then we're gonna.
Are you gonna put out your comments? Are you gonna publish them to us?
I could. You know, I hadn't thought about doing that, but that's not, I mean, they're public records, so that wouldn't be a problem.
Before the 11th?
For the 11th, no, I won't get to it before the 11th. I just don't see this out of the possibility. I'll do it before the 20th, but I won't do it before the 11th. But I will probably try to go to that hearing, so at the very least, I might make some comments there. But we will also have written comments as well. Are you just looking for sort of, you know,
There's no need for us to cover it if you've already covered it.
You know, I would just agree, yeah.
You should use that as a starting point, to see if you
Absolutely.
agree with it, that way.
But if 10 people object to it, it's
Right.
better than one of them.
Exactly, no, yeah, you
Our numbers.
hit on it, and in fact, I would say that if you guys have comments, if you email them in, feel free to CC me, I have a business card I can absolutely give you. I would love to see our comments. We are, you know, while we're thinking about this from a regional standpoint, we also, you know, we want to hear what you guys have to say, because it will feed into sort of our thoughts too. So any comments you guys have in that regard.
It may be regional, but boils down to individual towns.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, this is something that, these are hoops you guys have to jump through to get this higher level of consideration of 248. Not that that's the only reason. I know that, I want to be clear that we're focusing really hard on that component of it, but the truth is that there's a lot of other good reasons to do better energy planning. That's just the carrot that they're waving at everybody right now.
So they released the standards.
Last Tuesday,
And they're
the 20th.
closing comments
On
on
the
the
20th.
20th.
Yeah. It's a very, well, you know, because the legislature set they said you have to release these by November 1. And they had nothing in July when that passed. And so they basically had, since July 1 until November 1, to come up with this. And so the fact that they come up with something this cohesive is actually impressive. But it's, you know, it's sort of cramming it through, and I get your question.
I agree, I think it's really cramming it
Yeah.
through.
That's-
But that's,
That's actually a good thing, in terms of government.
yeah, right, right.
Give them credit where credit.
You're getting something
Yeah,
done.
And I can definitely say that having worked with the folks at the Department of Public Service, they're definitely trying, and there's, you know, I was at some of the meetings that they had, because they had stakeholder meetings sort of at the higher level in July, and I managed to get to a couple of them, and there was some pretty crazy stuff being discussed, and it's not in there, so I'm glad, because some of it was pretty crazy stuff, you know, the type of thing that made me go, well, then nobody's gonna do this. So that's not there, so they're definitely trying to take a fairly pragmatic and level-headed process here, but.
So let me just ask, if, you know, these hydro projects, how's that gonna wind up getting determined? Is it gonna get shoved down our throats just like the solar panel sightings? Or is it really gonna have some local input?
You mean in terms of permitting them?
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, they still have to go through the whole permitting process. I mean, one of the interesting things about
yeah,
that,
but it's gonna get a lot more chance of being permitted if it's agreed to in the,
well, but that's just it. You don't necessarily have to, I mean, even though we've indicated targets, you don't have to say, we're good with that.
Well-
You could say, for some reason, that this, you know, there are a couple, if you've got existing sites, well, yes, maybe those could be improved in terms of efficiency, but many of these other sites are unsafe and shouldn't be improved. One of the interesting things about that report in 2009 or 2007 or whatever it came out on the dams is if you look at the spreadsheet with the data in it, you know, she identifies tons and tons and tons of potential locations, and then there's a hazard classification in another column, and a lot of them are like, she identifies as having significant hazard potential, so probably they shouldn't be developed into dams.
Well, my A&R's pushing it big.
Right,
So
I mean,
they're moving.
that's one of the other things, is that, you know, we have sort of state policy now kind of going.
Uh-huh.
Well, what concerns me is that if you take a broad brush approach and just give some very general areas, if a town doesn't do this planning, there's much more, the potential is increased for like wind potentially, like I
Mhm.
frankly don't wanna look at, I
Yeah.
don't wanna look at wind turbines. So, and I live in Chelsea, which
Yep.
Thetford, I work with Thetford, live in Chelsea. Thetford, I think the community will come together, we'll come up with something. We have a strong energy committee. Chelsea, on the other hand, doesn't even have an energy
No.
committee. So if they do nothing,
Right.
they could potentially get wind turbines.
That's theoretical, I mean.
Right, but I mean, according to the plan, they're,
Right.
you know, they have a lot of
Right.
acreage that's suitable according to the numbers. So I guess my concern is that some of the smaller towns and the ones that are not as well equipped,
Yeah.
I mean, if you had specific areas targeted after meeting with towns, it would provide them with more protection.
Right, I mean, it's true, and we won't have that going into this, and maybe
Right.
that's something that happens in more iterations as we go down the road, but, so
They
you're
have
right.
to understand that,
you're
they
ab-
will have
you're-
to do the work.
You're absolutely right, is that there will be community, and because there are also communities who simply just like, well, you know, I don't think we wanna do this, and that's a choice. And, I mean, again, the other thing we have to remember is that this is market driven, and
Right, it has to make sense.
man, the odds of someone trying to propose a wind development these days are probably this big. And in our region, the only place we could really do a reasonably sustained, large megawatt wind development are basically the Berkshire, Topsom, Corinth area. And, I mean, I don't know what the likelihood of anyone proposing something.
Then you'll
like
never
that
meet
is.
the goals that are laid out in the
Right,
plan.
well,
So,
and you
I
know,
mean,
that's, in terms of the way we laid out in the plan, that's true. On the other hand, if another facility goes in somewhere else in the state of Vermont that's generating a significant amount of power, maybe ultimately that will be offset. Or we need to say wind is not something we really want, so we're going to encourage more solar. And I mean, there are downsides to that. You need significantly more solar to offset a megawatt of wind. And then there's the whole issue of storage capacity, which doesn't exist. And I mean, if Tesla's Powerwall comes out and is the miracle that everybody says it could be, that might very well change things. I mean, that one thing we have to remember, and you know, my analogy about us driving is that there may be, you know, we may find ways to get to the goal faster because of new technological advances or changes. And then the other thing too is that we have to recognize that this is still a political policy document, and you know, we're gonna have a new administration next time. I don't know how that's gonna affect overall policy statewide. You know, that one of the, we were discussing this when I first came in, is that in theory, the state could just ultimately choose to say, well, you know what, we're actually gonna purchase more of our renewable from out of state and we're good with that. Obviously it would take a legislative decision to make that happen, because right now these targets are all in statute, but, you know, who knows ultimately which path we're gonna take. So any other comments, questions? I'm happy to open it up and discuss this further.
We have a question for you, Dan.
Yeah. Did your question get answered?
Well,
Oh, yeah, right.
Not entirely.
Okay, go ahead.
This requirement for energy certification, whatever the title of it.
Remember, it's optional,
Right.
so it's only required
Okay,
if you want
I understand
that.
that, but is that statute or is that regulation proposed?
It is a statute that basically enables you to choose that path. And but it says in statute, the changes of Act 174, that changes of the various parts of statute specifically say, if you want this certification, these are the things that you must do.
I understand that, okay.
So,
But without that certification, the wishes of a town do not get substantial deference. They get blown over by the
yeah,
statewide policy.
due consideration for whatever that.
Well, in the regional plan, there's no state plan, there's no town plan, they'll look at the regional plan,
Right.
that's why,
And
if
then
it shows all those areas in your town and somebody wants to put a project in, they're gonna look at all of those being potential sites, even if the legislative body in the town's like, well, this is a scenic vista, we don't want any solar there.
Yeah, and I think, so we haven't yet figured out how those maps are gonna interact with the standards, so
That's what I
they
would
may change, to some extent. But again, until I know what they
Right.
really want, I don't know.
But that certification
Yep.
to have substantial deference is statute.
Yep.
It's not department
That is correct.
policy.
That is a change in statute. That basically, the statute has been changed to create that construct of this certification. And in statute, it says, if a town wants to go for this, then this is what you need to have in your energy plan instead of what is in the other part of, the standard.
But this is
Is
actually a
anybody
good,
running against your license?
no, but this is actually a good thing, it gives towns more control if you do it.
Yes,
right? I mean, that's all
yeah, and I mean, the truth of the matter is that
it's-
this isn't a bad idea. That, the idea
Right.
of doing a more in-depth energy planning is a good thing. Whether we agree with where the targets are, that's fine.
Which got us down to get going on it now.
But-
Yeah, although what I would suggest to communities is that you shoot for the fall. Because once we know what the.
Fall now or?
No,
No,
next year.
after June,
Yeah,
after the doctor.
you shoot for, sometime after we get our plan adopted. We will know significantly more about well, obviously, we're gonna know what the rules are in November. But we'll also have a better idea of how that interacts with our plan, and then take the time to do the work that needs to be done. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't be thinking about it now, because you should be thinking about it now.
But what happens with projects that come up in the interim?
It's business as usual at this point.
Under the old rules.
Yeah, I mean, you guys could try to do it quickly, once you know what the standards are, and then see if DPS can certify your plans, and that's in place, so they should do that. So if you feel like you can pull it together that quickly, I would suggest that, go ahead. But I don't think we're gonna be, until I know what their data requirements are, I can't give you guys information.
I think it's just gonna cost us an arm and a leg to do that kind of,
Well, hopefully, Steve, that what they'll ultimately require is data that we've already collected, so that it won't cost a lot. We do have some funding to assist communities, but it's not a big pot, so it'll have to be little chunks that we can help you guys do some additional work. And yet, we probably can't do all 30 communities, but we've got some funds to help with that. So we'll be in communication. We'll try to provide you guys with information. I mean, one of the things that I had in the very first draft was some model language. I pulled it because until I get their standards, I don't want to be giving you guys any model language that may not be accurate or worthwhile.
All your towns, why can't all your towns just have a template
ultimately, that's maybe the way we do it, except that, you know, everybody's different.
Right, but there's a basic template to hit all the points, and then
Right.
you adjust.
And we may be able to do that, because we already have our own internal energy template that we use when we're doing town
There
plans.
aren't the other regions that haven't done what you've done, kind of look at yours and the other two and copy.
Yeah, and they're already doing, everybody else is now doing these ones.
What were the three that were picked?
Two Rivers, Bennington Regional Commission, and Northwest Regional Plan Commission. And if you look at our different plans, they're all very similar. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but they're very similar.
So can you put in here that you, don't want to have, any, solar or wind if the credits are going out of state, because they don't help the state at all?
I don't think you can say no entirely, but I think you could, what I'm thinking, and again, this is just speculation, because we don't know ultimately how this is gonna play out, and even once we know the rules, until this goes to court, until it's in the permitting process, I don't know how the Public Service Board is gonna rule on anything. But my opinion is if they're supposed to be giving us this substantial deference, then if you put something to the extent of, you know, it is our preference
Or
that,
it must be offered to the town, to it, the investor and, or state?
yeah,
To be
because you,
invested before you run to Connecticut and Massachusetts?
you can't do anything that has the effect of prohibiting solar. So I don't know if you could outright just say no to anything that's not sold out of state. And one thing to recognize too is that they sell these on a yearly basis. And one of the things that I've been thinking too that towns might want to discuss in their plans is recognizing that sometimes the sale of these credits is what capitalizes the development of the system. That maybe you say, okay, so you want to sell those credits for the first 5 or 10 years out of state in order to capitalize it, that's fine, but after you've capitalized it, after you've paid for it, we're gonna give preference to the facilities that keep the credits in state. And I mean, I think that's what the town should say in their plans, is that,
But you can't apply for a second set of credits just because you have a new owner. 7 years down the road.
no, but they sell them yearly, so they could retire them, you know, the first year they could sell them out of state, the second year they could sell them in state, the year after that they could sell
Is
them.
there any set of statistics on how much in the last 5 years we've built and how much energy credit we've retained?
Yeah, I don't have it, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and the legislature is, they're ramping the cap up as to what is required to be kept in the state. I mean, that is one thing so it's not just this sort of static system that's guided only by economics. There is, the state is establishing higher thresholds and requiring Green Mountain Power, for example, to keep more of the credits.
In general, my opinion is that we've thrown a lot of ugly investments into renewable solar and or wind and kept very little of the benefit.
Yep.
With very little restriction on screening or anything else.
You know,
I mean, we might as well have billboards.
I mean, government is often reactive, and I don't think that they expected the flurry of development that they got as quickly as they got it. And so now they're like, whoa, okay, well, we're reacting, everybody's freaking out, so we need to do something, and this is the response,
And
for better or for worse.
This was, once Act 174 was largely driven by referendum that Rutland pushed around to all of the towns wanting it
Yep.
down here.
I mean,
Because of what with
Yeah.
development up and down 7.
yeah, well, and because of that, the one thing that was overturned, now I've read that decision, there were a multitude of flaws and reasons that got allowed, that would go well beyond sort of the fact that it was where it's located. But that said, that was what really got things rolling. And then, you know, there was a decision down in Bennington, this spring that denied a permit based on what they said were clear standards in the plan. I mean, I remain skeptical that those are really clear standards, but, you know, it's clear that there's a shift in how they're gonna approach this. Ultimately, it'll take a while before we see, you know, I find the Public Service Board process a little bit baffling. It's getting a little bit clearer because of some of these decisions have made it a little clearer, but hopefully one of the good things is okay, so cell towers actually, they're under similar regulatory structure, they go through the Public Service Board as well. That language, plans are supposed to get substantial deference, and I've heard people make the argument, well, they don't really get substantial deference for cell towers, why would they do it any differently for energy? Fortunately, in statute, they clearly, in this section of statute, with Act 174, they clearly say, for the purposes of this section, this is what substantial deference means. I can't spout it off to you, but it's very clear what it means, and so that at least is a good thing, it's a step forward, you know.
It defines the word.
Yeah, which is a step forward, you know.
Yeah, that's
Because it was a little hard to, I felt it was a moving target that I couldn't figure out what substantial deference meant. It's certainly not.
Or whose definition.
Right.
It just that they put this intermediate step in between substantial deference, which is
It's a carrot.
certification.
That's the carrot, and this is how you get it.
Yeah.
And I understand how why towns are frustrated with it, but it is the way it is for now. Anyway. Any other comments?
There's
questions?
another part that wasn't really on the energy, it was related to retrofitting houses, and, the fact that you're supposed to get that energy sign off at the state before the town can give a certificate of occupancy.
You mean for the renewable, or for the residential energy building standards?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
exactly.
many people, well, first of all, most towns around here don't require permits for interior renovations, which is where you would use a lot of that.
Yep.
Secondly, a lot of them are done by homeowners, so it's like totally impractical and ridiculous.
It is, and we talk about it a bit in this plan. I mean, it unfortunately is the system that is in
It
place.
does work more on the new construction.
Right, exactly. It
Major
applies
remodels
to
than it does.
Exactly.
You throw in a kitchen,
Right.
there isn't much there but you change your lights.
No.
And there's an exemption for homeowners, if you build your own house, you
Yeah.
can,
Yeah, you can do it.
Opt-out.
Right.
Yeah.
But
there are
it is-
ones that should have it.
And reality too is that it's only sort of enforced by the certificate of occupancy.
Right.
You know, okay, so we have 2/3 of our towns have zoning. I think maybe half of them have COs.
I doubt even have.
And some of them wanna get rid of CO.
Right, and it's not a perfect system.
And it doesn't
it is
matter
the
if you
system
get
we
one
have.
or not.
Well, lawyers keep saying that at some point this is gonna come up with a title search, that's what I keep
So you
being
come up
told.
with, as a zoning administrator, they call you and say, what do you know on this house? I said, as of today, I know of no violations on this piece of property. That's my pat answer. As of today, I know of no violations.
So we
That
talked.
doesn't mean there isn't, it just says, today I don't know.
So we did through a grant through HUD a couple of years ago. We did this massive sustainability project in Vancouver for a pretty progressive report, and there was a section on specifically looking at the built environment, and in that we've got a lot of discussion about how that system needs to be fixed. I didn't get into it too deep in this because I was trying to focus on things that Two Rivers can actually do, because that's a system I can't fix. And while I would love it if all our communities had zoning, and yes, it would be great if everybody had certificate of occupancies, I'm not gonna run around to our communities and harass them about doing that, because
Comes with a cost.
there are too many towns that just aren't interested, and that's fine, I mean, everybody's.
And there's a liability issue with providing certificates of occupancy. I mean, at some point to meet the FEMA regulations, you pretty much have to certify that a building met certain standards. Now, our zoning administrator doesn't know squat about that stuff.
And he ain't gonna give you one.
Right. So we don't wanna have to issue such things.
It is what it is, I mean, that's a construct that's in place, and I mean, I will say that the Department of Public Service recognizes that it's not a perfect system, but they only have so many people to enforce things, and they don't really have a system, they recognize that that's a system that needs improvement as well, but it's a legislative, and it would cost a lot of money.
It's what you call a name. You can give a certificate of compliance
Right.
that just says, this building is in compliance with the zoning permit that it got. End of conversation. It gives it no more, no less.
Right.
You know, if Vermont had building codes, this would be a non-issue, but we don't, and that's a choice we make as a state.
But we do, we have this residential energy
Right.
standard. We do have building codes. They're not
Energy code.
Right. It's a-
codified
Right.
as such, but they are there.
But it's not quite as well enforced.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have codes, you have code enforcement. And
Right. There's a national building code, but that's all done by building inspection.
right, and well, and there is there are commercial building energy standards, and they do have code enforcement. But I think that's an issue of
There are towns that do
capacity.
it for residential.
Hmm?
There are towns that do it for residential.
Right.
Hartford, you don't build outside their system without a sprinkler system. Okay, that gets, a single family home gets pricey.
So, any other thoughts or questions on the energy plan or any of this stuff?
I noticed you don't mention Washington Electric at all in here.
Yeah.
You said you're not power in a lot of places.
Yeah, well, I talked about them a little bit in sort
Yeah.
of recognizing that they exist, but we didn't get, you know, they weren't exactly easy to get a lot of data from. So I got what data we could get, like the three-phase power data we got, obviously from them and whatnot, but yeah, it's a pretty small part of our region. Any other thoughts, questions? So feel free to reach out to me. You know, I've got a business card, so I'll be more than happy to give you a business card if you don't know how to contact me, but, you know,
I just get a chuckle out of this whole circle. I can remember when they built Hydro Quebec, everybody protested it. It isn't green, it isn't this. The environmentalists went nuts over it. Now it's certified green. We've gone the full circle.
well, thanks everybody. I appreciate you all coming, and like you know, we'll keep we're gonna put new drafts out of this as we move along, and as we hear new developments with regards to the energy standards, we'll let you know. I definitely urge you folks to comment. It's important. And again, give me a call if you have any questions.
And if you don't